The Seattle sky was covered in thick gray that November morning, as if the weather outside reflected the unrest within. The eighth-floor apartment seemed suspended between two worlds, a silent refuge on the outside and a noisy prison on the inside. The fogged windows let in a cold, dead light that fell on the stacks of books that had never been opened and the half-empty coffee cups. On the cell phone screen, a party notification flashed like a cruel reminder. Today at 8 p.m., everyone goes. But she didn't respond. Never responded. She just saw it, deleted it, and pretended that forgetting was the same thing as not feeling. Outside, the city vibrated. Horns, voices, accelerated steps at intersections. Inside, silence. A kind of emotional muteness. It wasn't fear of contact. It was something older, deeper. As if each attempt to get closer carried the memory of a fall that she could no longer bear. When he went down the stairs of the building, always the stairs, never the elevator, there was a rigidity in his shoulders, an almost choreographed caution. His eyes didn't look at others. They stuck to neutral points, a coat button, a crack in the wall, the corner of the carpet in the lobby. There was something rehearsed in each gesture, as if the simple act of walking among people was a difficult performance to sustain. She passed by the corner cafe every day, but never went in. Inside, voices overlapped, smiles exploded without context, and any attempt at interaction seemed like a minefield. A misinterpreted hi could turn an entire trial, and judgments were blades disguised as looks. There was one memory that always came up when she tried to open up, the day when, at 10 years old, she exposed something intimate in class and they laughed. The sound of laughter still echoed from time to time in the empty corridors of the brain, without warning, without context. It was like a recording that could not be erased. After that, she started to calculate each word, measuring every smile, transforming presence into survival. Not speaking was safer than being misunderstood. At university, she was known as the quiet one, and at some point, she started to believe that she really was. But what no one saw was what was happening inside. Mental rehearsal of all sentences. Panic disguised as indifference. The absurd desire to belong colliding with the certainty that, if they saw who she really was, they would reject her too. Social media was a silent battleground. She saw others with their filters, their sharp captions, their declarations of belonging, but she felt like everyone was just dancing on a stage of insecurity, disguised as charisma. No one was really authentic, and yet she felt like she was the only one off script. Sometimes I would post something and delete it seconds later. The anguish of the trial was greater than any attempt at expression. On the subway, she observed faces. There was something lonely about all of them, but she didn't know if it was real or projection. An older woman cried silently as she read messages on her cell phone. A young man in a suit had his empty eyes fixed on some point in the past. Everyone carried their own ghosts, but only she seemed to feel that hers were always on the surface. During one sleepless night as the city slept and the clock flashed 3:27 in the morning, she remembered something she heard years ago in a therapy session that she never had the courage to continue. You're not afraid of people. You're afraid of not being enough for them. That phrase never left your head. It was like a mirror that she couldn't look at for long. At work, she was efficient, but invisible. He arrived early, left later, avoided happy hour, never left a trace. When someone praised her delivery, she was suspicious. When someone smiled too much, she prepared herself for the blow. She learned early that too much affection usually preceded a fall. It was as if every display of affection was just the calm before the storm. And the cruelest thing is that, inside, there was an absurd hunger for touch, for words, for presence. But she didn't know how else to ask. Pride became a shield, and a shield became a prison. Sometimes I thought about sending a message to that old friend or that colleague who seemed to care. But the words stuck in my fingers and silence always won. It was easier to say I was busy, that I liked being alone, that he wasn't much for socializing. But it was. It always was. She just didn't know how anymore. One Sunday afternoon, during a forced walk through the park, an attempt to get out of the spiral, she saw a child running and stumbling, and the father picking him up with a wide smile, without scolding. That took her apart, because she didn't remember being lifted with that kind of tenderness. Most of the time, stumbles were treated as weaknesses, as something to be corrected, not welcomed. Returning home, the street seemed emptier than before, or maybe, for the first time, she was seeing, because the emptiness was not on the sidewalks, nor in the buildings, nor in the silent subway corridors. The void was within, and it wasn't absent. It was excessive defense. She lay down on the sofa without taking off her coat, her body exhausted from protecting herself. The mind was still hammering on every word said that day, every gesture that could have been misinterpreted. And then, for the first time in a long time, she didn't force herself to get better. He just allowed himself to feel. And at that moment, a tear fell without haste, as if opening a chink in the armor. The following week, she didn't go to the party, but he responded to the message. "I'm not going today, but I appreciate the invitation. It was kind of you to remember me." It was simple, but it was a start. She didn't heal. I still stumbled over my words. I still avoided eye contact for too long. I still rehearsed sentences before answering the phone. But something changed, because for the first time she didn't see herself as broken, but as wounded. And wounds, she discovered, are not identity. These are untold stories. They are parts of the path, and they can heal. Sometimes she would still say, "I'm socially anxious," but now, deep inside, she knew. It wasn't anxiety. It was memory. It was rejection piled on silence. It was the fear of not being enough disguised as a preference for solitude. One morning, as she waited for her order at the corner cafe, the one she had avoided for so long, she looked around. Nobody judged her. Nobody tested it. Nobody expected anything from her. And in that instant, she realized that the world was less concerned about her than her mind made it seem. The cafe's lights flickered for a second, as if the space responded to their presence. As if, for the first time, she truly occupied a place there. And for the first time, she didn't feel like running away. Because deep down, she understood. The problem was never talking. The problem was thinking, for a long time, that no one would listen kindly. You don't have social anxiety, just trauma from rejection. And now that you know this, maybe, just maybe, you're ready to stop hiding and start to truly exist. If this touched you, share it, because maybe someone on the other side of the screen is feeling exactly the same.